This here is a high bush blueberry. It's actually the ancestor of our modern domesticated blueberry. This high bush wild type will grow pretty tall, like 20 feet tall. So what they did was bred them to make a smaller plant so it was easier to harvest the berries. But as you can see, there's a ton of berries on there. That's cool. Here's another patch of it growing pretty wild. Again, just totally covered in berries all over it. What I have the most of here on my land is this low bush variety called Hillside Blueberry. It loves to grow in rocky soil under the canopy of trees. So, uh, hillside, I mean, I'm kind of the perfect environment for this stuff. So this isn't starting to fruit just yet like the high bush varieties are, but it should be coming pretty soon. And man, I got a ton of this stuff. I'll show you some more. Okay, I lied. I found a few of these short bush ones that are starting to fruit. Hopefully I'll see a bunch more of it. All of this ground cover that you're seeing here is hillside blueberry. It's just going nuts out here. It likes this terrain, which is great because, I mean, so many people would walk through here and just see weeds on the ground, not take notice of it, but it is tons of edible food there. And I think a lot of people totally discount terrain like this too. Oh, a hillside like this, you can't grow food there. It's useless. It's not flat land. Not for me. I mean, this if something wants to grow in land like this, let it. This is the best type of gardening, in my opinion, where something just taking care of itself, and you just got to come out and harvest it when it's time. And even if it's something growing that you don't like, doesn't matter. Food is food. If nothing else, you can feed it to your chickens. I think a lot of people believe that because they have some chickens, it makes them more self-sufficient. But if you're buying all your feed for them from the local feed store, that's actually just making you more dependent on that feed store. I mean, sure, it's fine if you're just doing keeping chickens as a hobby thing. That's no big deal. But if you're doing it for self-sufficiency reasons or for preparedness for bad times, you got to be focusing on growing the food for your chickens. To me, that's more important is growing food to feed the chickens more so than for myself. Because if in bad times I can keep the chickens fed, they can keep me fed. I also wanted to show a relative that's in the blueberry family, and this is called a Farkleberry. Yes, Farkleberry, which is probably the best name for a food ever. But you can see it's starting to flower here. And each one of those little flowers, assuming they get pollinated, will end up being a fruit. It's cool. Um, it's supposedly not quite as good tasting as the other blueberry types, so a lot of people just write it off as useless, and also because the wood of the tree isn't very highly valued, people just discard it as unimportant. But one of my favorite authors about eating wild edible foods is Samuel Thayer. He said that it's got a very tart flavor. I haven't gotten to taste any of them yet, but he said it's a bit tart, so he mixes it with other fruits or berries. And he had once made a Farkleberry apple pie that his family just loved. And if nothing else, he says he usually just throws it in with cereal or oatmeal. As you can see, it's also a fairly attractive ornamental kind of bush. I like it. It grows naturally. There's this big patch of it, but there's more back in there. And then you can see down here individual plants here, there, one back there, one over in there. So it's one of those things that, hey, it's good. I'll let it keep going out here and enjoy having it. Cool plant. The state of Arkansas actually has a little bit of a history with the Farkleberry because back in the 60s, there was a road crew clearing a bunch of brush and trees on roadsides. And the governor at the time, Orville Faubus, showed up basically to do a photo op where he was dressed in overalls with an axe. The stunt, a politician pretending to be a real man. And he was there directing the workers on which trees they should cut down and which ones save because he insisted that he's knowledgeable on all the local flora. And there was a cartoonist for the newspaper that disagreed with him, didn't like the guy, and saw Faubus as a bit of an opportunist. So he started making political cartoons making fun of Faubus, where he would portray him, Faubus himself, with the Farkleberry because he thought it was hilarious that he had pardoned a Farkleberry, which at the time was considered to be a useless plant. So it ended up being that the governor named the walking path in behind his house Farkleberry Trail. The whole thing came about from it. And actually, there was a restaurant that opened in Little Rock where Fisher's cartoons were put up on display around the entire thing inside the restaurant. And the restaurant was called the Farkleberry. And then in the late 60s, a group of journalists had wanted to come up with an idea for raising money for education scholarships and that, and they decided to put on basically a play. And it was meant to be a political comedy that made fun of the Arkansas politicians. And actually, it was one of those things where the politicians were invited and they sat in the front row while the actors were making fun of them. So everybody in the audience can see, the politicians' reaction as they're being made fun of. So it's kind of like today we have celebrity roast, that kind of thing, which is such a change of pace. I mean, back then it was just understood that if you got into Arkansas politics, you had to have a little bit of a thick skin because you knew you were going to have to go to that and get roasted upon. And if you couldn't stand the heat, then get out of the kitchen. As opposed to nowadays, where if you even dare question anything one of these politicians say, you're censored and canceled and deemed an extremist. But just a totally different way. So when the people of Arkansas consider a politician to be inept and incompetent, they'll call him a Farkleberry. If that's the case, I think Washington, D.C. might be the Farkleberry capital of the world.